So I'm going to continue on from our last program, which had a bug, by the way. We had it set to 0 or 1. If we want to set the visibility of a button, we go view.invisible or view.visible to set that property. Now, last time I showed you how to create widgets and layout and set them up using Java, but what happens if we want to use this activity main XML file to actually design our GUI and then have stuff happen in our program? How do we access those buttons? So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get rid of the layout. We're going to bring back our set content view to the activity-main XML. So we're setting our content view of this frame of this activity to whatever GUI we set up in our activity main. Now, I'm going to leave button 1 and button 2 in here, and you'll see why in a second. Now, before we were actually creating these buttons, but we're going to create these using the WYSIWYG editor. So I'm going to drag 2 buttons, position them on screen. And one of the properties that I can set in here that you can look through is the ID. Now for the ID, it by default gives it an uninteresting name. So I'm going to give it a more interesting name. I'm going to say button 1, which is only slightly more interesting than the name it gave it. And the ID for this one is already button 2. So I'm going to leave it as that. So I've got my 2 buttons added on screen. So how do I actually access those buttons? Well, instead of creating new buttons, what I'm going to say is I want B1 to point to refer to be the name of in my Java section of my program to the button I created on the activity main. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to go this dot find view by ID, and what find view by ID actually does is it looks through the widgets that we've added on this layout and looks for it by that particular ID. So what I'm going to say is r.id. And you'll notice if I scroll down, did I miss it? Right there. There's the ID that we set our button 1. So I'm going to say I want B1 to represent our ID button 1 that we did. And I'll do the same thing for button 2. So I'm going to say r.id.button 2. There we go. Now you'll notice it's still underlined red because it's an error. Incompatible types found, Android view, and Android required Android widget button. That's because B1 and B2 are buttons. Find view by ID returns an ID, but since buttons are types of views, they extend views. And actually, if you look at the Android API, you'll see that the button class is coded by saying class button extends view. We can just cast it, which is change the format by doing this, saying this view that's being returned, we know it's going to be a button because we called it button 1, so we know it's actually that button. Since we gave the ID, we're pretty secure in that knowledge. So now everything else is going to stay the same. Remember, I deleted the layout. We're just going to set the content view to that layout off the XML file. We're ready to run our project. So power of video, we could skip through the waiting and the loading. Here's my new improved Android application that I designed using the activity main XML file as opposed to coding it. And let's see, since I haven't changed the on action, let's see if everything still works. So button 1 is clicked and we see the system.out button 1 was pressed, and now when I click on button 2, it makes button 1 disappear. So everything works as I expect it to, and now I know how I can access these widgets when I use the editor to create them.